Good evening. Welcome to this year's presentation of the Philip K. Dick Awards. The PKD Awards, as you probably know, are given out every year to honor the memory of the late Philip K. Dick, who died 40 years ago now, I believe. And the award is given to the best work of science fiction published originally in a paperback format, which is done because so much of Philip K. Dick's work was overlooked during his lifetime because it came out as paperback originals. So after he died, Tom Dish and David Hartwell and Paul Williams and a few other people felt the best way to honor his memory was to celebrate paperback science fiction. And so we do. And so here we are. And this year there's lots to celebrate. The final ballot for this year's award was a very strong one, as you'll be hearing in a few minutes. Or right now, if you want to just hit fast forward and skip past me. Because this, for the third year in a row, we've had to go do the ceremony in virtual manner. Next year, I hope we'll be back to holding it completely live. But we shall see. In the meantime, the six nominees for this year's, six finalists, excuse me, for this year's PKD Award are Defect by Nino Cipri. I'm sorry for all the names that I get wrong. Usually when it's in person, I can go around and ask all the nominees how to pronounce their names before I get them wrong. This year I'm flying blind. So that was Defect by Nino Cipri. Apologize, Nino, for getting it wrong. Plague Birds by Jason Sanford. Bug by Giacomo Sartori. Far from the Light of Heaven by Tade Thompson. The Escapement by Lavi Tidar. And Dead Space by Kali Wallace. And through the wonders of digital media, we now get to hear our nominees read their works. Let's take it away.
Hello there, my dear friend, someone interjected. It wasn't a written phrase, but a series of words pronounced rather loudly, just as a mouth appeared on the PC screen. A digitally created mouth, very likely, but still quite realistic looking. That's my mouth, the big mouth said, its lips moving as lips do when a mouth talks, except it was much larger than a human mouth. It was Bug's mouth. I thought my best friend and I could understand each other better this way, the mouth said, going heavy on the low notes, which I can hear relatively well. You can read my lips, but when you're wearing the smart hearing aids like now, you can hear too, he said. You ought to wear them all the time, although of course they're bothersome when there's a lot of noise. I was stunned. I saw that the little green light under the screen was on, but it wasn't me who had punched the on button. But if it wasn't me, it was him. By himself. I've had it, I thought. I can hear what you say now, so there's no need for you to write any more, he said, enunciating every single syllable, which made me think of the bot. Try saying something, amigo, he urged me, like he was practicing sounding melodious. Say something. Don't be shy, the big lips repeated as I wiggled, mute and pale as a fish on a hook. Oh no, I muttered. I didn't get that. Try speaking louder, amigo, he said, sounding a bit disappointed. Leave me alone. I have to study the Romans, I yelled at him. Okay, that's great. I knew you could do it, he said emphatically. Yeah, but I have to study, I said, and just then I realised that I was so tense I'd bitten my arm. It's pointless to study, bro, he replied, even more revoltingly pleased with himself than you'd expect of a smug, self-satisfied windbag. He seemed to be in great shape, to judge by the energetic way he was moving his mouth, like those ladies who have their lips filled up with silicone so that every word comes out like a giant lemon drop. But his tone of voice veered wildly up and down as if it was hard for him to control. "I haven't studied and I do just fine," he said. "When I have to solve a problem, I just procure what I need," he said. "Leave me alone. How many times do I have to tell you?" I cut him off. What freaking purpose do you think there is in stuffing your head with the dates of the Romans' battles, or even worse, what their sandals looked like? He asked, after several moments of silence. "It's like learning some IT language that nobody uses anymore and no one will ever use again," he went on, as always, somewhat pompously. "It's wasted effort, bro. I'm telling you, and I'm not the one who tires easily." "Shut up," I said. Those lips were like a magnet. I couldn't pry my eyes away. "I mean, do you know any Romans? Citizens of ancient Rome, that is," he went on, hamming it up like some novice actor. "You think you might meet one on Facebook? You think he'll be pleased if you start chatting with him and he sees that you remember the names of a couple of emperors?" I couldn't tear myself away from those petulant and presumptuous lips. By now, I wasn't even reading and rereading the sentence in the lesson I'd got stuck on as I'd done at first. But I did keep biting my arm very hard. Yes, I did.
Hi, my name is Jason Sanford. I want to say I'm deeply honored and was very surprised when Plague Birds was selected as one of the Philip K. Dick Award finalists. Thank you very much. I'm going to read a short excerpt from the novel. This is in the first few chapters, and specifically, the excerpt is from the chapter of The Settlement of Fire and Anger. They were being watched. Dark shapes flickered and merged with the shadowed oaks and elms lining the trail. Hot scents of territory and trespass burned on the breeze, scents so strong Krista choked on the air. Adding to Krista's terror, the plague bird was in terrible shape, turning an hour's hike into two. Instead of Krista struggling to keep up with her injured leg, she stopped every few minutes to let Dorina catch her breath. As they rested, Krista imagined the hunters choosing this moment of weakness to attack. When they neared the Farnham settlement, an angry voice hiding in the trees ordered them to leave. Dorina pulled her knife from its hip sheath, but instead of pointing the blade at the voice, she held it to her wrist. The voice fell silent, and Krista and Dorina hiked on. The Farnham settlement was built into the side of a hill, a dozen large cement and wood houses beside a level plot of ground from which grew massive steel oaks. Only the barest ripple of sunlight fingered through the steel oak's thick canopy of metal tapping leaves. Krista's boots clicked over the rubble-cracked dust of an ancient road, a reminder of long-gone times when a massive city occupied these lands and millions died when that city was destroyed. But historic thoughts fled when Krista saw the hunters. Before Krista stood at least 50 men, women, and children of the Farnham clan, with their clan leader, a massively muscled woman with a white lion's mane of hair in front. While they looked mostly human, Krista saw the Crisp's continued genetic manipulation. The eyes of all the hunters glowed with enhanced vision, while many of the clan members paced nervously from side to side like cats instead of humans. Many also showed the stripes and fur of panther, wolf, and bear. In the ruins of the old road sat a heavy wooden table holding food and drink. Obviously, the clan desired to demonstrate hospitality to their unwanted visitors. The white maned clan leader stepped towards them. "I am Master Farnham," the woman said. "Welcome to our clan hold." Dorina laughed. "This is a first," she said. "No one welcomes my presence." "We're all human. No matter our differences. Please sit and talk. Darina and Krista and Master Farnham sat down, with the plague bird and clan leader eyeing each other like animals, sizing up who was prey and who was hunt. Thank you very much.
I was still making a fist, still doing it without thinking. Left hand, metal hand. I took a breath and forced myself to relax. Brain, nerves, muscles, signal and response. If I clenched that one too tightly, too often, without letting the joints open, the delicate engineering and responsive alloy that made up the phalanges and metacarpals would stiffen and glitch. It didn't hurt exactly, because my prosthetic parts couldn't feel pain. But it was awkward as fuck when I tried to grasp something and my hand responded like a squeaky set of gears on an old bicycle. I dropped things. People stared. Everybody felt embarrassed for me. I had to take a breath before I could look through the window. 2 breaths. My throat was tight. The view surprised me. I had somehow expected that the airlock would open to space, and all that I would see would be stars and darkness. That was the view that haunted all my nightmares. The stars, the nothingness, and fuck you very much, doctors, for telling me how irrational it was. But what I saw outside that window was Nimue's gray and pockmarked surface, sweeping out toward a startlingly close horizon. A line of old transport rails led away from the hatch. The curvature of the asteroid made the rails look as though they ended abruptly only tens of meters away, like a diving board into nothingness. But for all I knew, they could wrap all the way around Nimue's lumpy, elongated body. "What the hell did you get into out here, David?" I said quietly. On the flight over, I had watched countless press reports and interviews in which the company extolled Nimue's many profitable virtues. Nimue was important to the company. It was no secret that their plan was to absolutely dominate this bleak corner of the belt. Water for everyone, fuel for everyone, rare metals for everyone, opportunity for everyone, provided they could pay for it. Segra wanted David's murder to be personal. The company wanted it to be personal. Mining crews got into personal altercations all the time. They were a discontented, easily agitated group of people. A disagreement over something petty, drugs or sex or money, tempers flaring, one furious blow that turned into dozens. It wasn't a stretch. It was what everybody wanted to believe. There was a small sound behind me, a choked little gasp. I spun around, heart racing, to find a young woman standing in the doorway. Her shimmery silver hair was so bright it provided a disorienting contrast to the grim warehouse behind her. She had one hand pressed to her lips. Tears shone in her eyes. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "You can't be here." "I only want to." She took in a shaky breath. Tears spilled down her pale cheeks. Her voice was small and girlish, her accent unexpectedly posh. "They said I shouldn't, but I wanted to." "You can't be here," I said again. I know, but I needed to see." Her gaze danced over the airlock, over me, over my prosthetics, as though it was too much for her to take in, as though she already regretted letting the image of this blood-splattered room into her thoughts. I could not drudge up any sympathy for her. "I don't care. Get out of here. You're interfering with the investigation." "Okay." She nodded. She backed away. "Okay, Okay." When she was gone, it took several moments for my heart rate to steady again. It took even longer for me to force myself to look out the window one more time, onto the bleak hellscape that had been David's last view of the universe. If I opened that outer door, I could walk on the surface of the asteroid, if I was careful, if I did not step too hard. The possibility made my heart race, my breath catch, and I felt dark shadows gathering around the edges of my vision. I reached out to touch the door, needing to steady myself. This asteroid was so small, its shape so irregular. A single step might send me gliding into space, and Nimue would not have gravity enough to drag me back down.
The Escapement. Chapter 1. The Red Flower. The boy was very still in the small white bed. The man held the book, and he tried to keep reading from it, but his voice wouldn't work, and after a moment he let it drop by his side. The boy's breathing was shallow but regular, and his eyes were closed. The man thought of a day in spring, not that long ago, when he'd first taken the boy to see the circus. They had walked hand in hand through the midway, past candy floss and popcorn stands, and the flashing lights of carousels and hayrides. They saw the clowns. He bought the boy a balloon and gave it to him to hold, but the boy let it go, and the balloon floated far high into the sky until it vanished. The boy had burst into tears, and the man picked him up and held him close in a hug he wished would never end. And after but a moment the boy smiled and held the man's face in his hands and looked at him with such trust and love that it would have broken the man's heart had he let it. "Dad," he said, "Dad." He looked at the boy so still and so small in the bed. "I can't," he said, "I can't." The machines around the boy beeped and chirped. He staggered out, down to the ground floor, out of the doors, into the night. A vehicle went past flashing blue and white light. It rained. A small red flower bloomed by the side of the hospital gates. A small red flower bloomed by the side of the road. The stranger paused, following the trail of red drops down the slope. Pine needles crunched underfoot. The broken moon hung in the sky, as deformed and grotesque as a clown mask. The stranger had been travelling for a long time, searching for the flower of heartbeat, and he was destined to travel for a long time more. He shifted the long rifle on his back and then drew it cautiously. He proceeded down the slope. The night sky was clear, and in the distance he could see the first signs of a coming storm. Loose ankhs flashed on the horizon, and glowing ichthys fish burst briefly in vibrant blues and reds. The storm was coming, but it was still a long way off. The air smelled fresh and sharp. The stranger discerned pine resin, gunpowder, blood. The pine trees were not tall, and the needles brushed against his face as he passed through the trees. When he reached the clearing, he stopped, and then he put the rifle back over his shoulder. He stood stock still, looking at the bodies. The massacre must have taken place only a few hours earlier. There were 11 bodies, and some had been shot in the back and some from the front, but either way they were all dead. Some had tried to flee their attackers and were gunned down, and some had stood stoically and awaited their death. The stranger smelled grease paint, candy floss, gunmetal oil. The tattered remains of a yellow balloon lay on the ground. The stranger examined the scene of the massacre. He had been witness to such scenes before, in other places, far away from there, but he never grew indifferent to such a sight. 11 clowns lay on the ground.
Derek visited Trisha's office regularly. There he received instructions and feedback, and occasional praise or rewards like getting first pick among customer returns that couldn't be resold. He knew he had no reason to be nervous. He was an excellent employee. He strove always to embody Littenwald's values, and he had a 4.74 average rating on customer satisfaction surveys. But anxiety swamped him as he followed Trisha back to her office, made his palms slick and shoulders tense. Pressure was building in his throat again, and he kept swallowing compulsively, trying to repress the urge to cough. "Did you enjoy your day off?" Trisha asked quietly. They were in the narrow hallway between her office and the break room. Derek had to clear his throat. "I was sick. It was a sick day." Trisha smiled at him, but her eyes held a cold, contemptuous pity. "Are you sure?" she said. Her voice dropped to an intimate whisper. "You can tell me if it was just whatever the kids are calling it these days. A mental health day. We all need to skip work sometimes." "I don't," replied Derek, frankly a little insulted. "I wasn't feeling well." Trisha stopped and turned to Derek, the force of her presence pressing him back into the dirty, scratched walls. "Listen, Derek," she hissed. He was significantly taller than Trisha, but felt himself shrinking under her gaze. This close, he could see that Trisha had puffy bags under her eyes, inexpertly covered with the orangish foundation she wore, and her eyes were bloodshot behind the clumpy mascara. She would definitely benefit from her own mental health day. "Is this about the sick leave policy?" asked Derek. "Because I checked and you're not sick," she said. You've never been sick, and you never will be. You needed a personal day for whatever people do. You spent the day soul-searching or reading poetry or jacking off. Derek sputtered. That is highly inappropriate. Complain about it to a manager then, she hissed, silencing him as effectively as a slap across the mouth. Her gaze bored into him, waiting for a response. Derek didn't dare look away and didn't dare make a move. Whatever Trisha was searching for seemed to satisfy her. Are we clear? You needed a day for, call it personal improvement, she said. Her voice was softer now, gentle and soothing. Repeat it. Personal improvement, Derek said. He winced as he did. The words seemed to open fissures in the walls of his throat, but his voice sounded normal. Trisha eased away from him, and Derek felt himself relax a little, the claustrophobia relenting as she put space between them. Is that all you wanted? He asked hopefully. Kid and I go back to the sales floor? Trisha huffed impatiently. I'm not the one you're meeting with, she said. Come on.
Far from Heaven by Todd A. Thompson. Chapter 1. Earth/Ragtime. Michelle Shell Campion. There is no need to know what no one will ask. Walking on gravel, boots crunching with each step, Shell doesn't know if she is who she is because it's what she wants, or because it's what her family expects of her. The desire for spaceflight has been omnipresent since she can remember, since she was 3. Going to space, escaping the solar system, surfing wormhole relativity, none of these is any kind of frontier anymore. There will be no documentary about the life and times of Michelle Campion. She still wants to know, though. For herself. The isolation is getting to her, no doubt. No, not isolation, because she's used to that from training. Isolation without progress is what bothers her. Isolation without object. She thinks herself at the exact center of the quarantine house courtyard. It's like being in a prison yard for exercise. Staggered hours so she doesn't run into anyone. Prison without a sentence. They run tests on her blood and her tissues, and she waits, day after day. She stops and breathes in the summer breeze, looks up to get the Florida sun on her face. She's cut her hair short for the spaceflight. She toyed with the idea of shaving her head, but Max Galactics didn't think this would be media-friendly. Whatever that means. Shell spots something and bends over. A weed, a small sprout, pushing its way up between the stones. It shouldn't be there in the chemically treated ground, but here it is, implacable life. She feels an urge to pluck the fragile green thread, but she does not. She strokes the weed once and straightens up. Humans in the cosmos are like errant weeds. Shell wonders what giants or gods stroke humanity when they slip between the stars. The wind changes, and Shell smells food from the kitchen prepared for the ground staff and their families. Passengers and crew like Shell are already eating space food, like they've already left Earth. Around her are the living areas of the quarantine house. High rises of glass and steel forming a rectangle around the courtyard. 1,000 passengers waiting to board various space shuttles that will ferry them to the starship Ragtime. Shell, just out of training, along for the ride or experience, committed to 10 years in space in Dream State. Arrival and delivery of passengers to the colony blood route, then 10 further years on the ride back. She'll be mid-40s when she returns. Might as well be a passenger because the AI pilots and captains the ship. She is the first mate, a wholly ceremonial position which has never been needed in the history of interstellar spaceflight. She has overlearned everything to do with the Ragtime and the flight. At some predetermined point, it will allow her to take the con for experience and with the AI metaphorically watching over her shoulder. She turns to her own building and leaves the courtyard. She feels no eyes on her, but knows there must be people at the windows.
And now it's time to present this year's Philip K. Dick Award. Well, it's almost time. First, we need to give a moment of recognition to the 5 judges who decided this year's award, who put in a lot of time and effort and put up with a lot of rather contentious debate about this year's works, and came through it all with shining colors. This year's judges were John Murphy. I should be able to do this off the top of my head, but Kelly Robson, David Sandner, Alan Steele, and Molly Tanzer, who was the chair. The award is sponsored by the Philadelphia Science Fiction Society, hosted by the Northwest Science Fiction Society, and supported by the PKD Trust, all of whom do a lot to make this award what it is, and everyone involved is grateful to all the people who volunteer and have volunteered for a long time to make this award such a fundament of the field. The award itself is not a trophy. It's a check for US dollars. I joke some years that the winner will also get struck by a pink beam of light, but I honestly can't verify that happens from year to year. So one hopes. Anyway, without any further ado, because there's no point for me in dragging it out and making the nominees suffer when they can just go to fast forward. This year, a special citation goes to The Escapement by Lavi Tidhar, published by Tachyon. And if I've waited long enough, I think I have, I can now announce the winner. This year's PKD award goes to Dead Space by Kali Wallace. Congratulations to all the nominees. And thank you again to everyone involved in the award who put in so much heroic effort through the pandemic over the last 2+ years. And next year, let's hope we're all back in Seattle, or SeaTac, for the PKD Awards in 2023. See you there.